Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more Diary of Anne Frank. This was meant to be Tuesday's video, but I'm behind on everything, so yay. Anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and hop into this here. Friday, June the 9th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, great news of the invasion. The Allies have taken Bayeux, a village on the coast of France, and are now fighting for Caen. They're clearly intending to cut off the peninsula where Cherbourg is located. Every evening, the war correspondents report on the difficulties, the courage, and the fighting spirit of the army. To get their stories, they pull off the most amazing feats. A few of the wounded who are already back in England who also spoke on the radio. Despite the miserable weather, the planes are flying diligently back and forth. We heard over the BBC that Churchill wanted to land along with the troops on D-Day, but Eisenhower and the other generals managed to talk him out of it. Just imagine so much courage for such an old man. He must be at least 70. The excitement here has died down somewhat. Still, we're all hoping that the war will finally be over by the end of the year. It's about time. Mrs. Von Dahn's constant griping is unbearable now that she can no longer drive us crazy with the invasion. She moans and groans all day about the bad weather. If only we could plunk her down in the loft with a bucket of cold water. Everyone in the annex except Mr. Von Dahn and Peter has read the Hungarian Rhapsody trilogy, a biography of the composer, piano virtuoso, and child prodigy Franz Liszt. It's a very interesting, though in my opinion were a bit too much emphasis on women. Liszt is not only the greatest and most famous pianist of his time, he was also the biggest womanizer, even at the age of 70. He had an affair with Countess Marie d'Argot, Princess Caroline Saint Wittgenstein, the dancer Lola Montez, the pianist Agnes Kingsworth, the pianist Sophie Minter, the Circassian princess Olga Janina, Baroness Olga Meyendorf, actress Lila What's-Her-Name, etc., etc. And there's no end to it. Those parts of the book dealing with music and other arts are much more interesting. Some of the people mentioned are Schumann, Clara Wieck, Hector Berlioz, Johannes Brahms, Beethoven, Joachim, Richard Wagner, Hans van Bülow, Anton Rubinstein, Frédéric Chopin, Victor Hugo, Honoré de Balzac, Hilaire Hummel, Czerny, Rossini, Cherubini, Paganini, Mendelssohn, etc., etc. Liszt appears to have been a decent man, very generous and modest, though exceptionally vain. He helped others put art above all else, was extremely fond of cognac and women, couldn't bear the sight of tears, was a gentleman, couldn't refuse anyone a favor, wasn't interested in money, and cared about religious freedom in the world. Yours, Anne M. Frank. Tuesday, June the 13th, 1944. Dearest Kit, another birthday has gone by, so I'm now 15. I've received quite a few gifts. Springer's 5-volume art history book, a set of underwear, 2 belts, a handkerchief, 2 jars of yogurt, a jar of jam, 2 honey cookies, small, a botany book from my father and mother, a gold bracelet from Margot, a sticker album from the Landans, Biomalt and sweet peas from Dussel, candy from Miep, candy and notebooks from Bep, and the High Point, the book Maria Teresa, and 3 slices of full cream cheese from Mr. Kugler. Peter gave me a lovely bouquet of peonies. The poor boy had put a lot of effort into finding a present, but nothing quite worked out. The invasion is still going splendidly, in spite of the miserable weather, pouring rains, gale winds, and high seas. Yesterday, Churchill, Smuts, Eisenhower, and Arnold visited the French villages that the British have captured and liberated. Churchill was on a torpedo boat and shelled the coast. Like many men, he doesn't seem to know what fear is. An enviable trait. From our position here in Fort Annex, it's difficult to gauge the mood of the Dutch. No doubt many people are glad the idle British have finally rolled up their sleeves and gotten down to work. Those who keep chiming they don't want to be occupied by the British don't realize how unfair they're being. Their line of reasoning boils down to this: England must fight, struggle, and sacrifice its sons to liberate Holland and other occupied countries. After that, the British shouldn't remain in Holland. They should offer their abject apologies in all the occupied countries, restore the Dutch East Indies to its rightful owner, and then return, weakened and impoverished, to England. What a bunch of idiots. And yet, as I've already said, many Dutch people can be counted among their ranks. What would have become of Holland and its neighbors if England had signed a peace treaty with Germany, as it's had ample opportunity to do? Holland would have become German, and that would have been the end of that. All those Dutch people who still look down on the British, scoff at England and its government of aging lords, call the English cowards, yet hate the Germans, should be given a good shaking, the way you plump a pillow. Maybe that would straighten out their jumbled brains. Wishes, thoughts, accusations, and reproaches are swirling around in my head. I'm not really as conceited as many people think. I know my various faults and shortcomings better than anyone else. But there's one difference. I also know that I want to change, will change, and already have changed greatly. Why is that? I often ask myself that. Everyone still thinks I'm so pushy and such a know-it-all. Am I really so arrogant? Am I the one who's so arrogant, or are they? It sounds crazy, I know, but I'm not going to cross out that last sentence because it's not as crazy as it seems. Mrs. Van Daan and Dussel, or my 2 chief accusers, are known to be totally unintelligent and not to put too fine a point on it, just plain stupid. Stupid people usually can't hear it when others do something better than they do. The best examples of this are the two dummies, Mrs. Von Don and Dussel. Mrs. Von Don thinks I'm stupid because I don't suffer so much from this ailment as she does. She thinks I'm pushy because she's even pushier. She thinks my dresses are too short because hers are even shorter. And she thinks I'm such a know-it-all because she talks twice as much as I do about topics she knows nothing about. The same goes for Dussel. But one of my favorite sayings is, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I readily admit I'm a know-it-all. What's so difficult about my personality is that I scold and curse myself much more than anyone else does. If Mother adds her advice, the pile of sermons becomes so thick that I despair of ever getting through them. Then I talk back and start contradicting everyone until the old familiar "and" refrain inevitably crops up again. No one understands me. This phrase is part of me, and as unlikely as it may seem, there is a kernel of truth in it. Sometimes I'm so deeply buried under self-reproaches that I long for a word of comfort to help me dig myself out again. If only I had someone who took my feelings seriously. Alas, I haven't yet found that person. So the search must go on. I know you're wondering about Peter, aren't you, Kit? It's true. Peter loves me, not as a girlfriend, but as a friend. His affection grows day by day, but some mysterious force is holding us back, and I don't know what it is. Sometimes I think my terrible longing for him was over-exaggerated. But that's not true because I'm unable to go to his room for a day or two. I long for him as desperately as I ever did. Peter is kind and good, and yet I can't deny that he's disappointed me in many ways. I especially don't care for his dislike of religion, his talk of food and various things of that nature. Still, I'm firmly convinced that we'll stick to our agreement never to quarrel. Peter is peace-loving, tolerant, and extremely easygoing. He lets me say a lot of things to him that he'd never accept from his mother. He's making a determined effort to remove the blots from his copybook and keep his affairs in order. Yet, why does he hide his innermost self and never allow me access? Of course, he's much more closed than I am, but I know from experience, even though I'm constantly being accused of knowing all there is to know in theory, but not in practice, that in time, even the most uncommunicative types will long as much or even more as someone to confide in. Peter and I have both spent our contemplative years in the annex. We often discuss the future, the past, and the present, but as I've already told you, I miss the real thing, and yet I know it exists. It is because I haven't been outdoors for so long that I've become so smitten, or is it because I haven't been outdoors for so long that I've become so smitten with nature? I remember a time when a magnificent blue sky, chirping birds, moonlight, and budding blossoms would have captivated me. Things have changed since I came here. One night during the Pentecost holiday, for instance, when it was so hot I struggled to keep my eyes open until 11:30 so I could get a good look at the moon, all on my own for once. Alas, my sacrifice was in vain, since there was too much glare and I couldn't risk opening a window. Another time, several months ago, I happened to be upstairs one night when the window was open. I didn't go back down until it had to be closed again. The dark, rainy evening, the wind, the racing clouds had me spellbound, but it was the first time in a year and a half that I'd seen the night face to face. After that evening, my longing to see it again was even greater than my fear of burglars, a dark, rat-infested house, or police raids. I went downstairs all by myself and looked out the windows in the kitchen and private office. Many people think nature is beautiful. Many people sleep from time to time under the starry sky, and many people in hospitals and prisons long for the day when they'll be free to enjoy what nature has to offer. But few are as isolated and cut off as we are from the joys of nature, which can be shared by rich and poor alike. It's not just my imagination. Looking at the sky, the clouds, the moon, and the stars really does make me feel calm and hopeful. It's not much better medicine than valerian or bromide. Nature makes me feel humble and ready to face every blow with courage. As luck would have it, I'm only able to, except for a few rare occasions, to view nature through dusty curtains tacked over dark caked windows. It takes the pleasure out of looking. Nature is the one thing for which there is no substitute. One of the many questions that have often bothered me is why women have been and still are thought of to be inferior to men. It's easy to say it's unfair, but that's not enough for me. Really like to know the reason for this great injustice. Men presumably dominated women from the very beginning because of their greater physical strength. It's men who earn a living, beget children, and do as they please. Until recently, women silently went along with this, which was stupid, since the longer it's kept up, the more deeply entrenched it becomes. Fortunately, education, work, and progress have opened women's eyes. In many countries, they've been granted equal rights. Many people, mainly women, but also men, now realize how wrong it was to tolerate this state of affairs for so long. Modern women want the right to be completely independent. But that's not all. Women should be respected as well. Generally speaking, men are held in greatest esteem in all parts of the world, so why shouldn't women have their share? Soldiers and war heroes are honored and commemorated. Explorers are granted immortal fame. Martyrs are revered. And how many people look upon women, too, as soldiers? In the book, Men Against Death, I was greatly struck by the fact that in childbirth alone, women commonly suffer more pain, illness, and misery than any war hero ever does. And what's her reward for enduring all that pain? She gets pushed aside when she's disfigured by birth. Her children soon leave. Her beauty is gone. Women who struggle and suffer pain to ensure the continuation of the human race make much tougher and more courageous soldiers than all those big-mouthed freedom-fighting heroes put together. I don't mean to imply that women should stop having children. On the contrary, nature intended them to, and that's why it should be. What I condemn are our systems of values and the men who don't acknowledge how great, difficult, but ultimately beautiful women's share in society is. I agree completely with Paul de Cruyff, the author of the book, when he says that men must learn that birth is no longer thought of as inevitable and unavoidable in those parts of the world we consider civilized. It's easily for men to talk, but they don't and never will have to bear the woes that women do. I believe that in the course of the next century, the notion that it's a woman's duty to have children will change and make way for the respect and admiration of all women who bear their burdens without complaint over a lot of the pompous words. Yours, Ann M. Frank. But we'll go ahead and end that episode there. We're not far from the end of the book. We got 321. And the afterword ends 341. So yeah, we've got 20 pages left. I might make an extra long episode next week to finish it off. But yeah, we're just about done with the diary. It's been interesting. Because we get a good look at Anne Frank as an individual. So yeah. D-Day, the invasion of France, has happened, and the Allies are slowly driving their way through Europe. France, as they come along the towns and the countryside, they liberate those areas of France because it's still under German occupation. France, after the First World War, was completely devastated. Germany was still devastated worse, but where it had driven this devastated nation into a manufacturing superpower, it was able to provide the weapons and with the blitzkrieg tactics to just overtake France. And remember, in the beginning, there is no USSR to threaten Germany from the east, because they have an armistice, which Hitler foolishly breaks. You know, if he hadn't broken the armistice, it might have been a different story. The outcome of World War II. Because as many Americans would like to believe, it was American intervention. No. America's intervention helped, but it wasn't the deciding factor. Because Germany was now having to fight a war on two fronts. Because with the Blitzkrieg and the military might, they were taking territory. Boom, 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 boom. Britain was safe because it was an island nation. Though it was still being bombed. It's the fact that the USSR put up such a stiff resistance to Germany. Yeah. Because they occupied so much of Europe. I mean, the nations they didn't occupy were usually neutral. Switzerland, Spain, yeah. For the most part, though, Hitler was just sweeping through Europe, devastating opponents. But it was this conqueror's greed that kind of screwed him. They tried to go into northern Africa. And like I said, they were bombing Britain. And broke their own armistice with the USSR. Canada was already involved as they were still territory of Great Britain. Eventually the US would be involved as well. But yeah, the beginning of the war, we supplied the Allied nations. We provided stuff to Britain and other Allied nations to kind of give them support, at least support in the form of supplies. which is always a better answer than war. I'll not deny that sometimes war is inevitable, but you must always seek another way than just fighting. But yeah, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. It's already been a long one here. But thank you all for watching. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.